Section 9 of To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 18. As usual, Lily thought. There was always something that had to be done at that precise moment, something that Mrs. Ramsay had decided for reasons of her own to do instantly. It might be with everyone standing about making jokes, as now, not being able to decide whether they were going into the smoking room, into the drawing room, up to the attics. Then one saw Mrs. Ramsay in the midst of this hubbub, standing there with Minta's arm in hers, bethink her, yes, it is time for that now, and so make off at once with an air of secrecy to do something alone. And directly she went, a sort of disintegration set in. They wavered about, went different ways. Mr. Banks took Charles Tansley by the arm and went off to finish on the terrace the discussion they had begun at dinner about politics, thus giving a turn to the whole poise of the evening, making the weight fall in a different direction, as if, Lily thought, seeing them go, and hearing a word or two about the policy of the Labour Party, they had gone up onto the bridge of the ship and were taking their bearings. The change from poetry to politics struck her like that. So Mr. Banks and Charles, Mrs. Ramsay going upstairs in the lamplight alone. Where, Lily wondered, was she going so quickly? Not that she did, in fact, run or hurry. She went indeed rather slowly. She felt rather inclined, just for a moment, to stand still after all that chatter, and pick out one particular thing, the thing that mattered, to detach it, separate it off, clean it of all the emotions and odds and ends of things, and so hold it before her, and bring it to the tribunal, where, ranged about in conclave, sat the judges she had set up to decide these things. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it right or wrong? Where are we all going to? And so on. So she righted herself after the shock of the event, and quite unconsciously and incongruously used the branches of the elm trees outside to help her stabilise her position. Her world was changing. They were still. The event had given her a sense of movement. All must be in order. She must get that right and that right, she thought, insensibly approving of the dignity of the tree's stillness, and now again of the superb upward rise, like the beak of a ship up a wave, of the elm branches as the wind raised them. For it was windy. She stood a moment to look out. It was windy, so that the leaves now and then brushed open a star, and the stars themselves seemed to be shaking and darting light, and trying to flash out between the edges of the leaves. Yes, that was done then, accomplished, and as with all things done, became solemn. Now one thought of it, cleared of chatter and emotion, it seemed always to have been, only was shown now, and so, being shown, struck everything into stability. They would, she thought, going on again, however long they lived, come back to this night, this moon, this wind, this house, and to her too. It flattered her, where she was most susceptible of flattery, to think how, wound about in their hearts, however long they lived, she would be woven. And this, and this, and this, she thought, going upstairs laughing, but affectionately, at the sofa on the landing, her mother's, at the rocking-chair, her father's, at the map of the Hebrides. All that would be revived again in the lives of Paul and Minta, the Rayleighs. She tried the new name over, and she felt, with her hand on the nursery door, that community of feeling with other people which emotion gives, as if the walls of partition had become so thin that practically the feeling was one of relief and happiness. It was all one stream, and chairs, tables, maps, were hers, were theirs. It did not matter whose, and Paul and Minta would carry it on when she was dead. She turned the handle firmly, lest it should squeak, and went in, pursing her lips slightly, as if to remind herself that she must not speak aloud. But directly she came in, she saw, with annoyance, that the precaution was not needed. The children were not asleep. It was most annoying. Mildred should be more careful. There was James wide awake, and Cam sitting bolt upright, and Mildred out of bed in her bare feet, and it was almost 11 and they were all talking. What was the matter? It was that horrid skull again. She had told Mildred to move it, but Mildred, of course, had forgotten, and now there was Cam wide awake and James wide awake, quarrelling when they ought to have been asleep hours ago. What had possessed Edward to send them this horrid skull? She had been so foolish as to let them nail it up there. It was nailed fast, Mildred said, and Cam couldn't go to sleep with it in the room, and James screamed if she touched it. Then Cam must go to sleep. It had great horns, said Cam. Must go to sleep and dream of lovely palaces, said Mrs. Ramsay, sitting down on the bed by her side. She could see the horns, Cam said, all over the room. It was true. Wherever they put the light, and James could not sleep without a light, there was always a shadow somewhere. But think, Cam, it's only an old pig, said Mrs. Ramsay. A nice black pig like the pigs at the farm. But Cam thought it was a horrid thing, branching at her all over the room. Well then, said Mrs. Ramsay, we will cover it up. And they all watched her go to the chest of drawers, and open the little drawers quickly one after another, and not seeing anything that would do, she quickly took her own shawl off and wound it round the skull, round and round and round, and then she came back to Cam and laid her head almost flat on the pillow beside Cam's, and said how lovely it looked now, how the fairies would love it. It was like a bird's nest. It was like a beautiful mountain such as she had seen abroad, with valleys and flowers and bells ringing and birds singing and little goats and antelopes and... She could see the words echoing as she spoke them rhythmically in Cam's mind, and Cam was repeating after her how it was like a mountain, a bird's nest, a garden, and there were little antelopes, and her eyes were opening and shutting, and Mrs. Ramsay went on speaking still more monotonously, and more rhythmically, and more nonsensically, how she must shut her eyes and go to sleep, and dream of mountains and valleys and stars falling and parrots and antelopes and gardens, and everything lovely, she said, raising her head very slowly, and speaking more and more mechanically, until she sat upright and saw that Cam was asleep. Now, she whispered, crossing over to his bed, James must go to sleep too. For see, she said, the boar's skull was still there. They had not touched it. They had done just what he wanted. It was there quite unhurt. He made sure that the skull was still there under the shawl. But he wanted to ask her something more. Would they go to the lighthouse tomorrow? No, not tomorrow, she said, but soon, she promised him, the next fine day. He was very good. He lay down. She covered him up. But he would never forget, she knew, and she felt angry with Charles Tansley, with her husband, and with herself, for she had raised his hopes. Then, feeling for her shawl and remembering that she had wrapped it round the boar's skull, she got up and pulled the window down another inch or two, and heard the wind, and got a breath of the perfectly indifferent chill night air, and murmured good night to Mildred, and left the room, and let the tongue of the door slowly lengthen in the lock, and went out. She hoped he would not bang his books on the floor above their heads, she thought, still thinking how annoying Charles Tansley was. For neither of them slept well. They were excitable children, and since he said things like that about the lighthouse, it seemed to her likely that he would knock a pile of books over, just as they were going to sleep, clumsily sweeping them off the table with his elbow. For she supposed that he had gone upstairs to work. Yet he looked so desolate. Yet she would feel relieved when he went. Yet she would see that he was better treated tomorrow. Yet he was admirable with her husband. Yet his manners certainly wanted improving. Yet she liked his laugh. Thinking this, as she came downstairs, she noticed that she could now see the moon itself through the staircase window, the yellow harvest moon, and turned, and they saw her standing above them on the stairs. That's my mother, thought Prue. Yes, Minter should look at her, Paul Rayleigh should look at her. That is the thing itself, she felt, as if there were only one person like that in the world, her mother. And, from having been quite grown up a moment before, talking with the others, she became a child again, and what they had been doing was a game, and would her mother sanction their game or condemn it, she wondered. And thinking what a chance it was for Minta and Paul and Lily to see her, and feeling what an extraordinary stroke of fortune it was for her to have her, and how she would never grow up and never leave home, she said, like a child, "We thought of going down to the beach to watch the waves." Instantly, for no reason at all, Mrs. Ramsay became like a girl of 20, full of gaiety. A mood of revelry suddenly took possession of her. "Of course they must go, of course they must go," she cried, laughing. And, running down the last 3 or 4 steps quickly, she began turning from one to the other, and laughing, and drawing Minta's wrap round her, and saying she only wished she could come too, and would they be very late, and had any of them got a watch? "Yes, Paul has," said Minta. Paul slipped a beautiful gold watch out of a little wash-leather case to show her. And as he held it in the palm of his hand before her, he felt, "She knows all about it, I need not say anything." He was saying to her, as he showed her the watch, "I've done it, Mrs. Ramsay, I owe it all to you." And seeing the gold watch lying in his hand, Mrs. Ramsay felt, how extraordinarily lucky Minta is. She is marrying a man who has a gold watch in a wash-leather bag. "How I wish I could come with you," she cried. But she was withheld by something so strong that she never even thought of asking herself what it was. Of course it was impossible for her to go with them. But she would have liked to go, had it not been for the other thing, and tickled by the absurdity of her thought, how lucky to marry a man with a wash-leather bag for his watch, she went with a smile on her lips into the other room, where her husband sat reading.